Welcome to another episode of The Greatest Pod, where we discuss and debate what makes something great. I'm Ed Greer.
I'm Ron Swallow.
And I am producer Bill.
And today we have a guest, illustrious comic book artist, a foundational guy for me, foundational member of the Drink and Draw crew. He's Jeff Johnson. He's been on an episode with me breaking down all types of art stuff from Neil Adams to that Neil Adams episode is fucking amazing if you want to check it out. Jeff has a Kickstarter, baby. He's got a Kickstarter and his book is called Rogue's Kingdom. It is written by the great James Robinson of Starman fame and many other things, drawn by Jeff Johnson and colored by Brennan Wagner. Please give it up for and the Kickstarter is live right now. I believe they may be funded, but you need to get on there and get those super sweet perks that he's drawn.
Yeah.
So sweet.
I'm already in there. I got a book coming.
Yeah.
I'm excited.
Yeah, fuck yeah. So let me introduce Jeff Johnson.
Yeah, everybody. It's nice to be back.
I got to tell you something, Jeff. I remember now. I remember one of the times I was with Ed. I think it was LA Comic-Con, and he's like, I'm gonna go meet this guy. I really like him. He likes our podcast or something, and don't embarrass me. And I was wearing a Green Lantern shirt, jacket, and then I was like in my head, and then you started saying the phrase to Green Lantern.
Oh, in Darkest Day or Brightest Day, Darkest Night, yeah.
Yeah, and my brain just turned off, and I was like, what? What are you talking about? And I was like, he was like, the saying to Green Lantern. I was like, and Ed is later on was like, dude, you embarrassed me.
I'm like, I'm speaking your language. I've seen the ring.
Yeah, 100%. It was hilarious.
Dude, it's funny. But basically, meeting Jeff really was meeting Jeff, Dan Panosian, meeting Dave Johnson, meeting Cully Hamner, meeting Scott Collins. Like all of these people are people I've looked at from afar. So to have some of you guys as my friends right now, it just blows my little. If I could go back and tell little Ed that he was going to know Jeff Johnson, like, get the fuck out of here. You're going to be a pro basketball player.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
You're going to know Jeff Johnson alongside Magic and Kareem.
Yeah, come on now. That's crazy. It is funny that the other day I was doing a podcast and someone goes, the legendary. I'm like, okay, enough with that. That's insane. Walt Simon is the legend. I'm a guy who draws comics. Like, I think that we can agree.
Well, that's the generational legacy of comics, though, because like I came in Wonder Man, Solitaire. I thought Solitaire was the coolest fucking thing the Ultraverse ever did by far. Dude. I was all up on Solitaire, dude. That was, that was the Ninjak of my day.
Oh, that's funny. Yeah, Ninjak was definitely an inspiration, that's for sure.
I talk about this all the time on this podcast, though, is like I got into comics at this really weird time where the Image, launch had already happened, but we hadn't quite hit the bottom of the cratering of comics. And so for me, things like the Clone Saga and the Ultraverse and like the Acclaim Valiant stuff was all like really foundational, even though in retrospect, maybe not the greatest comics, but like all that stuff is at the like foundation of my brain when it comes to comics.
Yeah, that's what's interesting when you get in, because like a lot of the stuff that I fell in love with is it's core comic book mythos, except that if you look back at the stuff, a lot of it is just workman level. It's craftsmanship, right? It's like they got the book in, they got the book out, right? There's not a lot of splash pages. Nothing is super fancy. It was really meat and potatoes back in the day, and I loved it. It's hard for me to look at like the more modern stuff, which is phenomenal, but very bells and whistly sometimes.
Takes itself very seriously.
Yeah, I'm like, oh no, they went too far with like I'm an old man about like, oh man, that should not have been a close up. That should definitely have been more of an over the shoulder shot. Like, so it's funny the rules that I grew up with are not the rules anymore. And so Rogue's Kingdom, I think, kind of looks. I mean, I like it, but it looks kind of old fashioned.
Interesting.
I don't know if it looks old fashioned. We were talking a little bit off air, and I'll just compliment you again on air. I feel like the amount of detail that you are packing into the environments, everything from just like desert mesas to crazy cityscapes to, you're inside a bazaar. I don't see any old school comics going to the lengths that you're going to really get that sense of place and time and consistency from panel to panel. Like, it's one thing to do like the Image guys did, where here's your big money shot of whatever, the spaceship in the sky, and then it's nothing but close-ups from there on out.
Right.
I guess maybe it's old-fashioned in that way, where it's like, oh no, once I establish a sense of place, we are going to live in that place.
Yeah.
But otherwise, like, the dynamics that you're bringing to the work is really something else.
Well, let's take a look at one real quick. How about this guy? If you guys are listening on the podcast, go to our YouTube. You can check out this insane whole city with clouds and a sun and boats in the river, dude.
And if you look real close, I don't know if you can see it in the small picture. I actually have people walking in the street that are going about their vesper, like their evening constitutionals. And I actually had to resist putting more little people in, because I'm like, no one cares. No one's going to care about that guy.
Really, Ron, throw that up one more time. I just have a comment from my perspective as far as someone who draws. The perspective on this is amazing because there's very few square edges. Most of the time you do buildings, you just draw a bunch of fat rectangles and figure out where the vanishing points are. This is like, it's got a little bit of it's curvilinear, with you basically making sure that the rounded domes are in correct perspective. These weird tumescent things are in perfect perspective. You know what I mean? Like, that's really the feat to me. And of course, Brennan's lighting on here is pretty amazing.
Yeah, he did an incredible job. Giving it the flavor of that. Was it the magic hour? Is that what it's called? That hour before sunset? Yeah, he really captured that. He gave the city a sense of like grandeur, I think, but also there's a sense of like dark shadow to it. It's a port city. It's a fun and dangerous place.
Yeah, and let me say, from a total novice point of view, I like it's almost like there's nothing symmetrical per se about it. Because whenever you look at a city from, like, you go up to Hollywood Hills or Mulholland Drive and you look down into the valley, it doesn't look symmetrical. It looks like there's a bunch of buildings in a bunch of different ways, and how each building is a different size, and there's nothing specific middle about it. And I think that actually makes it a little more of a real feel to the city. Because you're not looking at, like, sometimes in comics, you'll see somebody build a city and it's like everything is symmetrical and the buildings match perfectly. And it's like there's a thing to it that's stale.
Right.
It's like when you add in a different feel to that, it feels like it's like a real life, like it's a lived in place.
Well, I really wanted it to be the city that people would feel like they've been to before or seen before, but not quite seen. So it's really based on kind of a lot of French Mediterranean cities where, like, it's hills and there's, and you kind of wanted to layer it in. And I definitely wanted to pull you down to the water, pull you through the city. So I shaped it as kind of like a funnel. But it's so Ed will know how meticulous, if not obsessive, I can be about things. I have the palace and whatnot are clearly up on the hill overseeing the city. And then I have different neighborhoods. So I have a map, which someday I'll share. It's clearly, Ron, are you laughing at me, Ron? Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah. So there's clearly where the city is, or where the palace is. And then there's the merchant quarters. And then there's the tougher part. And then there's down by the ports and the piers and whatnot. And so I have various roads that I know that are going, and so I know what road the princess takes back to the city, and so in my mind I know where it's all at, and I know it can be a little more work than is sane, but for me it helps me know how long. Like, what's funny, Ed will appreciate this, is like, so I know how long it will take her to get from place to place. So in my mind, that's how many panels she needs.
Oh, yeah.
That's
it's-
meticulous, and I love it.
Yeah.
People don't think about the fact though that like that is something Tolkien would do as he's creating his fantasy world.
I was
like there's a
literally just going to bring
reason
that up.
Yeah.
he made all those maps, and I think we do ourselves a disservice when we think of that as too much work. Because if you're trying to create an immersive world, and we allow novelists the leeway to do this sort of thing, that is the work you have to do.
Yeah.
Oh, this is one of the first images I saw from this. That it's this whole silhouette. The silhouette is perfect and very animation-y, and then we get these traditional Jeff Johnson buildings, and I love the fact that you kind of fade the buildings out around the figure, obviously to highlight it. But it's just little touches like that. Certain modern comics would draw all those lines and obscure the purity of that silhouette, but you kind of know when to wax and wane with detail. So you're not just hyper detailed insane person.
Right.
I think you're trying to do it for a purpose, and so basically you're trying to make this a real world. So let's hear about it. What is the pitch for Rogue's Kingdom, Jeff?
So that scene that right there, that one where she's running across the rooftops, is that character is and I'm going to get to the whole pitch in just a sec, but that character, that's the princess. Her name is Princess Tara. But she is our Zorro character. Like, why she is the princess and she's the heir to the throne, and she is often I had to draw a lot of very fancy dresses. She is also sort of the secret guardian of the kingdom. She takes care of protecting her father, who is the king, and making sure things go smoothly and that he's safe. And she fights crime, and she gets involved in a lot of the behind the scenes politics as the character's the Terror. And so she is one of the protectors of the kingdom. The big picture that you saw, that's Lumpland. That's the name of the kingdom. And the story is that if you go back to the beginning of the comic, our main character, the kid Peachy, and the older guy, the other main character Rondo, are both in a prison cart at the end of a caravan. And that caravan, that's Peachy. And that is the caravan driver, who has his own character sheet and his own backstory, even though you don't see him more than the.
I remember you telling me about your process of, like, I think writing a bio for the carriage driver, but also figuring out how he held the reins, what sort of way he was sitting for maximum. It was so funny, dude. And I was like, this guy, you think you're not a genius, and that's what makes you one. Because that's part of it. And like Bill was saying, it's part of the work that you need to make things have a certain verisimilitude. But anyway, so Peachy.
All right, so Peachy and Rondo. Rondo is the guy with white hair. That's Arlo. He's the poor guy who's also in the cart with him. And we'll come back to him because James in the comic, we have the stuff that there's Rondo, Rondo and Peachy. So those two characters are on their way to either go to jail or get hung, but they're on their way to trial in the city of Lumpland. The capital of the country is the city Lumpland. And they're in the back of the caravan. And meanwhile, in the front of the caravan are a young wizard and his guardian. And they're on a giant elephant. And they're on their way to Lumpland because there's 3 main city-states in our story so far, in the beginning of our story. And each one has its own wizard. And each wizard is sort of the nuclear deterrent. Like, we won't mess with your city. You don't mess with our city. We have a wizard. So everyone is sort of a magical détente. Like, no one messes with anyone else because they all have these wizard nukes, and they live to be a very, very. They're very old and they're very powerful, and they're the only ones that can do magic. It's a very small, select group of families that have the ability to use magic and be wizards. And so the one wizard in Lumpland has died mysteriously, and his replacement is on the way to Lumpland, and that's that little kid. That we see he's the same age as Peachy. They're about the same size. And the caravan is on the way to the city, and it gets attacked by centaurs and some soldier guys. And basically the young wizard and his guardian get killed. And then the whole caravan gets attacked and everyone gets slaughtered in the caravan, except that Peachy and Rondo's wagon goes over the side of the cliff. And then that's where the first issue kind of ends. It's like they go over the side of the cliff, so they're not dead. But then in the rest of the story, what happens is they wind up surviving the attack and deciding that instead of going back to where they were from or going back to Lumpland, where they're going to basically be hung or put in jail, Peachy comes up with the idea is like, instead of doing that, it would be better if they took the places of the dead wizard and the guardian, took their identities, went to Lumpland as those new recruits, as the new wizard and his guardian, steal a bunch of stuff, and then leave. So
yes. Yeah, I think there was an Ocean's 11 part of it you were pitching me, and
right.
that's where it comes in. It's just like that's perfect. I love it.
And pretended to be wizards, so they're going to have to do shenanigans to prove that they're wizards. Oh, this is great.
Yeah. So Rondo is a great fighter, but he's not a knight. You know, he doesn't wear armor. He's a swashbuckler. He's a fencer, and he's a great swordsman, but he mostly plays the mandolin and gets in trouble. And then Peachy is he's a pickpocket, and he's super clever, sort of a street urchin. And when Rondo brings up, is like, but you don't know any magic, right? And so Peachy's like, you can fake that. Like, come on, no one really does magic. Like, he's like, no one really does magic. It's all bullshit. So they wind up assuming these personas, and then they go to the city. And it turns out that there is a plot to kill, like the wizard was killed by someone, and there is a plot to kill the king and take over the city. So now
they're embroiled in it because they still think the wizards. Oh,
they still think they think Peachy's the wizard, and so now everyone's trying to kill him and Rondo because they took these characters that have a mark on the back. So so now they're dealing with that, and the princess is trying to figure out who's trying to kill her dad. There are assassination attempts, and then while all that is happening, the city is preparing for the huge welcoming ceremony where Peachy does huge acts of magic, and it's like it's supposed to be a big show that he puts on this act of magic for the whole city. And then Rondo is also has to be in this tournament where the guardian proves he's the guardian of the wizard, and so defeats all comers in this tournament. So he has to prepare for this tournament and keep from being assassinated, and try and keep his Rondo alive, and keep this keep the king and figure out what's going on. So there's a comedic sort of absurdity to it, but it turns out that Peachy actually can learn magic, and Rondo is a really great guardian, and so they wind up saving the city, and they wind up saving the king, and they become the heroes that they never wanted to be. So in that regard, it's just a very classic fantasy story. But the characters, I think, they kind of came to life for James and I. Like, we started talking about them, and then once we knew who the characters were, everything just sort of sprouted from that. It all became very like, oh, well, this is what they would do in this situation. So
this is so interesting, because now this episode's kind of about just talking to you about this thing that you made, but it's also about the idea of independent comics. And I got to say, this is one of those scenarios where there isn't a lot of options for you to make this within the tentpole of either Image, DC, or Marvel for the most part. And you can't tell the Doctor Strange version of this story. You know what I mean?
No.
That's what's so cool, is that independent comics give you this ability to tell a little more of a different type of story than you would get from your traditional comic books. So that's
think exactly. One of the things about, I've worked for Marvel and DC, and one of the things about those characters is like they will go through change, but the thing that makes them viable is that they are basically the same every month. So that's kind of what you want. You want a Kyle Rayner adventure, but when Hal became a villain, that was bad, right? So like you can't really change stuff. And I do think that a lot of these characters are the parameters are a bit written in stone. So I think that with a new comic and a new idea and an independent idea, that you can play with old themes in a fresh way, and you can make new connections with the fans.
Yeah, that's awesome. So go ahead, Bill.
Well, I also wanted to branch that off into the artistic conversation, and I think you're working in sort of a rich tradition in independent comics of being able to go places with your art that you really couldn't in the monthly grind of a Marvel or DC. And I mean, I think that goes all the way back to something like ElfQuest, Richard Corbin's work, a lot of the Metal Erlant's heavy metal guys. You know, I love that personally. And it's always been so strange to me that more of comics fandom hasn't embraced that ability to just go wild on the page when you're not stuck to the you know, bullpen sort of tropes and schedule.
I think that, I mean, because a lot of these guys like Alan Davis do an amazing book every month and can do everything. But like, I do think that for most humans, the time it takes to draw stuff is one thing, but then the time it takes to figure out what that stuff is something that was almost never really given to artists. And I think it's, that's why there are so few guys who did it great. Like Jack Kirby would create shit on the fly.
Sure.
Right. He would just, but he's remarkable. No one can do that. Right. Like it's, right. So, and that's why I think that a lot of comics have a certain language of like, oh, this is this kind of character. This is that kind of build. And I do think that's a time constraint issue more than anything else. It's like, you got to do a minimum of a page a day. Back in the day, Gil Kane would do several and Kirby would do 3 or 4. And like John Buscema would lay out 5 and he would just like, you're just going. And so you had to feed the machine. I think one of the things about being an independent creator is that also, it's one of the reasons it takes a book to make so long is that your other job pays for your passion. So I do a lot of storyboards and commissions and other stuff to pay the bills. And then when it comes to Rogues, it's just, how cool can I make this? Yeah, right. Yeah, right. So
dude, this one, that one we'll go back to it. I just want to say that is one of the coolest drawings. I know you don't like the legend words, but dude, that conveys so much information. Let's just take a look at that right there. We talk about like one of my favorite things that you do that I think you and I'm, you know, when I say this, I'm not blowing smoke up your ass, to be clear. One of the things you do better than anyone is a fight scene. There is you don't have to put a swish sound. You don't have to put any movement bars in this. We know exactly what is happening from this one panel, what this fight is looking like, how this lady's kicking this dude's ass. You already know.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, I put a lot of thought into making sure that the action conveys the story as much as possible. Because clearly, like, he's taking a huge swing at her and she's sidestepping it, but she also could be stabbing him.
Yeah.
Right. Like that's she's not stabbing him, which is
a purely defensive position as opposed to like attacking him back.
Yeah. She's like, okay. I mean, for me, the fight's over. I mean, the fight's over. He's taking wild swings and he's tough, but like she's never really in any danger. Yeah.
I get that completely from that drawing. It's also remarkable. I mean, again, we're talking about the level of detail. You know, you could tell that those weapons aren't just something that you scattered down on the page. Like you put some thought into those individual weapons.
Yeah.
And even down to like the crowd gathered in the background, that's not just a bunch of quick drawn ovals with a couple dots and lines. Like it's people, you know? And again, I really appreciate that. You know, independent comics is such a wide swath of different creative expressions. Like you can get something like this, which is very detailed and meticulously worked on in the vein of, you know, a world building fantasy novel. And you can also get the stuff that's a little bit more sketchy, slice of life, autobio comics.
Right.
But I want to ask you, from inside the world of independent comics, do you feel like that model, doing things outside the big 2 or even the big 3, if you include Image, is changing? And if so, how?
Well, so I'm pretty new to Kickstarter. Like I've gotten many projects off. I bought and supported many campaigns because it's such a niche isn't the right word, but like it's such a refined collector mentality, or it's just such a specific thing. Like if you want, like I recently bought the the John Sable freelance huge compendium done by Mike Grell with new material in it, and it's a comic that I loved as a kid. I loved it so much that when the show came on, I was excited about the show back in the late 80s. And so, and the book came out and it was great. And I have him and I have really fond memories of him, but he wanted to do more stories and he wanted to finish the saga. And there's not really a marketplace for an old, 80s character done by Mike Grell. I think there are fans out there, but for $100 book with extra stuff in it, like that's a very specific group of people, and Kickstarter makes that really easy to find. So if you're looking, and like, this is like Rogue's Kingdom is fun fantasy, but it's not superheroes. And so a lot of times, I don't know, a lot of people, I mean, I love superheroes too, but like finding a new fantasy thing, it's a very specific group of people, and Kickstarter makes it very easy. Like, they recommend stuff. Their way of cross promotion is fantastic. And I do think that that's something that the independent comics have more, especially Kickstarter. I have found that all the creators on Kickstarter are super, not just willing, but eager to promote your thing. Like, oh, you have a fantasy thing? I have a fantasy thing. Oh, you do this kind of thing? I do. I will. It's much more of a camaraderie than I've ever noticed before on comic books. Like, the other companies don't support the other companies. Like, they're not going to be like, if you like Superman, you'll like this. That doesn't happen.
Well, speaking to that though, you do have an extra, like you had a partnership with another fantasy creator, and you're going to be sending out along with your book when people reach a certain tier. Can you talk to that? Because that's exactly what you're talking about. You're going to send out somebody else's book along with your book. That nobody does that. So talk about that.
That's very cool.
Well, so we're Inked Ink Studios is the people, Kevin, this guy who's helping me with Kickstarter, because it's a lot of stuff to know. And one of the things that seems like is pretty common is they also have other creators. And so if you reach a stretch goal, I will send you one of their books as a bonus. And then they'll send you, if they reach their stretch goal, they'll send one of my books as a bonus. So if you like fantasy stuff, you're going to get, and you support me, you're also going to get this extra fantasy stuff of someone you might also really like. So it doesn't cost the fan anything extra. It's kind of like, it's like being Canada free. Like, oh, you like Lord of the Rings? You might like Michael Moorcock. Like
Sure.
there's, and I think that just is, it's a way to lift each other up in a way.
I'm sorry, did you say his name was Moorcock?
Yeah.
Ron,
I miss that joke?
You always got to go for the low-hanging fruit, Ron.
Sorry, man. How did I miss that joke?
Yeah. Well, Michael Big Dick was never as popular.
Yeah.
That's why you changed his name.
Yeah.
And that's why Elric had that big ass sword.
Exactly.
Big black sword. All right, stop it, guys.
Okay, listen. It's money in the bank. So I do think that there is, and the competition is always healthy and it's good, but I do think that as the idea of like, oh, I'm a Marvelite or I'm a DC guy, I do think that's an outdated concept. And I like the idea of being able to like to make the fan the focus again, right?
Yeah.
Instead of like having, oh, well, we're gonna do this, we're gonna have another relaunch because we can get another number one, so that you're forced to buy a thing. I do find that sort of predatory consumerism that's run its course in comics.
Yeah, and this is a better way to do it, because if you think about it, so I'm going to get this guy's book because I bought your book. Now, if I love his book, the next time he does another Kickstarter, I'm going to throw in $20 to his Kickstarter,
right?
And get that. And then I'm probably going to get some other book, and then maybe I make another fan that way.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden we're supporting a bunch of different people. And when each person supports another person for being artistic, we all expand. I know communism is thrown around as a bad thing, but let's just think of that as a commune of people who are nice and sharing and community.
Yeah.
I was going to say, I think that there's been kind of since the birth of the internet, there's been this ideal of creating something like an artists collective where you're not working under the auspices of a company. You don't have to share control with some corporate entity, but everybody mutually benefits. And like, I wasn't aware that this sort of thing was happening because I'm not a huge Kickstarter backer. I've backed a few over the years,
Right.
but that's kind of amazing because that is what artists have been trying to do since the dawn of the internet.
Yeah. Well, because
Okay. Well, and I read a tweet, and Twitter's a dumpster fire, but I did read a tweet that was very that spoke to this a little bit, what we're talking about as far as independent, as far as not having a company behind you. They said some of y'all need to start following creators the way that you follow characters. You'll feel better about your fucking self, or something like that. And it's because characters will always be whatever they need to be for the present time. They'll live forever. They'll never die. They'll change it to a red and blue energy man for no fucking reason for a while. They'll do a lot of stuff on you, but they'll always go back to their other way. And like, if you follow the character and you go, Superman would never be a warlord that's a blue energy man, that is also a moon, that is also, he's Lois Lane now. All those things, you don't have to worry about that when you're following creators, because creators will make stories, end stories, make characters, kill characters. Look at the stuff that Homeboy put Cerebus through.
Oh,
For
yeah.
300 issues. There's things like that you can do when you're the creator. The creator is the juice. You know what I mean? There's a different economy. If you look at most big two comics, yes, people care about who wrote it and drew it a lot, but there are people who are just picking up Batman. There are people who are just picking up X. If they don't get the Batman they thought of in their mind when they were 10, then they're all dissatisfied. Well, guess what? You don't have to fuck with that at all. You can you can figure out how. I'm not talking about fuck with big two comics at all, but you don't have to mess with those feelings at all. You can follow the people who drew Batman the way you want to draw him and read those. And similarly with independent comics, the people who generate the stories you like, the people who do the work you like. I'll read Lee Bermejo anything. You know what I mean? I follow him more than I would follow Batman. I follow you more than I would follow Wonder Man. They're when people really clue into the creator part and the creator voice as part of their appreciation of comics, that's what fuels this new economy. And that's what's so exciting about it, is that finally the creator not only gets their due until they sell out to DC. No diss, but you know, it's not about that. It's about you getting all your shekels. It's you being the engine and the thing that people follow.
Yeah, and like in this character specifically, how did you come up with this character in this one?
So the guy with the 3-prong gauntlets, or with Terra?
Terra, your main character. Although if you have a backstory for this guy, which I'm not surprised if you do.
Oh, I have a backstory, and I have a future plan for him. Yeah, no, yeah, he's got a full arc.
Yeah, hey, that's beautiful.
Yeah, so Terra is she's like I said, she's the daughter of the king. She's the princess.
Yeah. How did you come up with that concept first, by the way? When you were coming up with the whole story idea, where you guys were just chatting it up and we're like, we want a princess that
was all James. I think I don't know where he came up with the concept, because we were talking mostly about Beachy and Rondo, and like that was the story, that was the plot device that we were really kind of playing with in the beginning. And then like he came up with this cool princess character. Like she's our Batman. She's our Zorro. She's, she's that character who's in disguise. And then, and so that, I mean, that's all James. And then I just really wanted her to be, I worked in a book a while ago called The Way of the Rat. And one of the characters in it was, she was also a princess. She actually wasn't the princess. She was the princess's maiden, the handmaiden. So she was in the court, and she was all along, and she was very unassuming. And then when shit got real, she jumped out. It's a classic character. It's a standard trope that's she's kind of a superhero. And then I really wanted to kind of use a lot of that design theory I used in The Way of the Rat for the Silken Ghost, which is flowing cloth and moving stuff. And I gave her, so she has those cool long daggers, and she has a bunch of throwing knives. And she is just a general badass who dresses in rags, so to make it even more unlikely that someone would think of her as the princess. So that was, I think every good fantasy story has to have, a hidden secret Batman, Zorro kind of character who does the thing, like, because fantasy stuff, you always want to have the king and princesses. You want to have that royal action. You want to have that stuff happening in the palaces and in the throne room. But like, you don't want that guy to, I mean, if that guy's going to be like that, it's boring if that guy's Conan all the time. So you kind of want some secrets. And she is that secret person. Like even her dad doesn't know. So I think that one of the things that happens in issue 2 is she protects him from an assassin's arrow. And then she's looking at the arrow and she's like, oh, it's got these markings. Like, what? That's so weird that it was coming from there. And his first thought is like, how do you know anything about arrows? You're like, so she almost gives it away. You're like, oh shit. And so I think playing with that, I love secret identities. I mean, I love Peter Parker. I love all that stuff. So she gets to be kind of our secret identity superhero.
There's shades of even like the Batgirl Jim Gordon relationship in what you're saying. Which is another great thing about, one of the other things you can kind of do on the sly when you're doing your own book, as opposed to trying to work within the parameters of an established universe, is like you can still use some of those story ideas or character dynamics that would work well in your favorite characters, but you just put it into your thing. Is that something that like comes to mind even when you and James are collaborating, for example?
I think what happens is you have the language of what kind of character, of types of character just in your head. Sure. And so when you go like, oh, we really need the precocious scamp character here. And then you have basically a litany of those in your head. And you're like, okay. And so you kind of pick and choose. Rondo he's not an original character. He is very original for me, but like, he's a wandering sword fighting troubadour who has sex with the wrong women, right? Like that is, it's almost cliche, but he's such a cool archetype that I've always wanted to draw that character.
Yeah, he's even got my name, which is literally perfect because if I just had a sword, it would have been a story of my life.
Yeah, you play the mandolin, don't you?
Sure.
Hey, fucking mandolin karaoke. But basically, I love like Mike Mignola on Fafford and the Gray Mouser.
Oh yeah, that stuff is classic.
And I don't really, you all know me. I don't really fuck with magic, and fantasy worlds are sometimes too dense for me and too I don't know, some I don't get into them enough to learn all the rules, so I can appreciate the fact that the wizard had to like squeeze out 5 drops of blood and find some newt while he was running away from assassin's daggers, and then he mixed it up. You know what I mean? That I don't really get into it like that, but like when you do action it up like I just did, that's good. I like that. Like John Wick putting together the gun to shoot the guys coming through the door, but it's with magic. Shit like that I love that. And it seems like you're really tapping into that with your different sorts of characters and what the lineage. I'm real anti-lineage guy, but it's good that you're using such lineage to make magic in this world because it excludes people like Peachy. And Peachy's like, fuck that. I'm just going to pretend. You know what I mean? I love that.
Well,
and then it turns out that the lineage is bullshit, right? I mean,
it is bullshit. Yeah. So it's the lie that everyone's been told that only certain people can use magic, even though there's magic everywhere and there's centaurs and animal people and fairies and dragons and all that stuff.
Dragons.
Dragons. There's going to be some cool dragons. There's a whole in the next story arc. There's an entire mountaintop has been carved into a city by dragons, and at the top are where the bigger dragons live. And as you go lower and lower in the city, they become like the smaller and smaller and less. They don't have wings, and they do more like the actual work of a city. So like I've been designing basically if the Himalayas were carved into a classic, almost Roman city, what that would look like. So I've been working on that, but like.
I'm so pumped about that.
I'm excited to see that. That sounds amazing.
It's gonna be super, super cool. And you have to take a classic fantasy balloon airship to get there. So it's all that.
Yeah, this is great. I feel like this is for me. I just gotta say,
Ron's drooling at all these.
I'm so excited.
Right. Well, I mean, so one of the things I love about great stories is great fantasy or science fiction is like, yes, you have. They're remarkable and they're fantastic, but also a really good story always has real characters dealing with real stuff.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I find really fascinating about the story James and I written is like, it's anyone can do magic. Anyone could do it, except that no one's been told they can, and the secrets to doing it have been kept secret. So this potential wonderful thing for humanity is just kept in the hands of these very few people. And they've got everyone thinking that they're nuclear weapons. And then Peachy gets in there and he finds out, like, oh no, anyone can do this. In fact, I'm better at this than any of them because I come at it in a way that they're stuck, right? They have too much structure. They have too much tradition. They're not thinking clearly about how to do it. And so you'll like this, Ron. At one point, and this is a couple of story arcs away, there is a wizard battle that he has to go up against the other wizards to prove himself. And they think he cheats, but mostly he just outsmarts them. Like there's one where I can't wait to draw this someday. You create these basically, remember that scene in Big Trouble in Little China where they make right? Ron knows exactly which one I'm talking about. So they do that, but with smoke. So they light candles and they use their willpower to turn the smoke into avatars.
Yeah.
And the contest is to defeat the avatar. And at one point, Peachy throws a rock at the wizard he's fighting, and it hits the wizard in the head, and his concentration goes. And then Peachy's avatar defeats his avatar. And they're like, "You cheated." He's like, "You lost you couldn't maintain concentration. Like, you suck." So I did. My avatar beat your avatar. If throwing rocks was against the rules, you should have put that in the rules. So. Yeah.
That's always the Air Bud exception. You know what I mean?
Exactly, right? That's 100%. So I think Peachy's approach to magic, he winds up becoming a very powerful wizard because he's not hobbled by stupidity. All their old ideas.
Or dogma. Awesome. All dogma is not stupidity, but the Venn diagrams overlap very well.
They do, right? Yeah, some tradition is fantastic. Like, but also if the tradition is why an old guy can do it and a young guy can't, that's usually going to be a problem.
Mm-hmm. Or a poor guy can't do it, or a rich guy can, and so
on. Exactly. I mean, and that's really what we're talking about is like the resources that people are allotted.
Can you talk a little bit about your collaboration with James Robinson? I'm sure a lot of our listeners will know who he is, but you know, just to refresh them, you know, he really broke huge with Starman in the mid 90s at DC, but he's done a ton of work, and you've done a ton of work with him.
So this is actually the first time we've done anything together. I've done a ton of, So, but it's fun, because James and I have known each other since Malibu days.
Yeah. So maybe you guys were just on parallel tracks, because I could have sworn
we've been tangential a lot, but never actually on a project. So he worked on Firearm. I worked on Solitaire. He was at DC when I was at DC. He was doing stuff with Paul Smith. He did The Golden Age, which is incredible.
Yeah.
He did Leave It to Chance. So his Starman stuff is incredible. So we've been friends and side by side for a lot of stuff, but this is actually the first time we're really doing something together. So it's been really, really great. And we both took a break from comics for a while. I did animation. He's been writing screenplays and TV. And then a few years ago, we started talking about let's do a comic. Let's make a comic. And
one thing I want to ask really quickly is, I've noticed that I think he worked with either Tommy Lee Edwards or Tony Harris before.
Mm-hmm, Tony Harris. Mm-hmm.
He's worked with you. It seems like there's some sort of connectivity with this sort of, and with Paul Smith, right? On Leave It to Chance. So it seems that when he's looking for collaborators, he's not looking for, it seems like you guys have a very clean style, a very economical, even though it may be laden with detail style. Is that something that he's talked to you about as far as why he likes working with you? Or I just noticed that as a through line, there's not a lot of sloppy, shadowy art in comics written by James Robinson. It seems to be clean, clear, detailed, but not too much so. Is that something?
I don't know if we've never talked about consciously, and I don't know if he has if he's choosing artists because of their style. I think one of the things James and I have bonded on, I know that he's bonded with his other artists in the same level, is for him, the most important thing is a clear, concise story. that the what's happening is conveyed with as few, not, I know bells and whistles isn't right, but it's like as subtly and as smoothly as possible. James wants the comic book experience and the reading experience to be immersive. And so I do think that a simpler style, like a Paul Smith or a mine, or even a Tony Harris back in the day, like it's representative. Like, oh, that's what's happening. You can just look at it and you just automatically know what's going on. And I think I think that just sort of comes out when you're working on a James project, is like, oh, I see it so clearly. Like I can take a snapshot of like, this is what's happening. And it doesn't need, like, and a lot of times it's not served by lots of line work or heavy cast shadows or over the top drawing. Yeah. But no, it's an interesting question. I think maybe I know he's drawn to storytellers, and I just wonder if that's something that we all have in common.
Oh, it makes sense. So that's interesting. You made me think, like, when do you know when you're working on something like this? When do you know something's supposed to be more tight and simple or more complicated? Like, how do you decide that? What storytelling thing is the thing that makes you go, okay, I got to add more lines to the muscles or the whatever that is? I don't know exactly what that is because obviously I'm not an artist, but you know what I'm saying, I think.
I do. I think that a lot of it is what you're trying to convey, right? Like I think that there's some artists are trying to convey a picture in space, like, oh, this is a freeze frame of this tableau is here, and so they will do amazing work. They'll light it and they'll put line work. Like Barry Windsor Smith does this. Is like each picture, each Barry Windsor Smith thing it exists in 3-dimensional space. I think he renders it. Everything has the right shadow and it's the right all the textures are there. And some artists approach stuff that way. I'm much more trying to capture a moment in time. So it's more of a snapshot of like, oh, that moment is happening, and then you move on. And so I have so I try to have my stuff not get weighed down in that moment. If I want you to spend a lot of time in a picture, in a panel, I will layer the lines to guide your eye in a certain way and then make it stop. But mostly I want you to see it, get the information, and then move on. I want the text and the story and what's happening to be the driving force, not how it's happening. That make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, moment in time. Kind of like this one with this like super cool water buffalo, and we're kind of going through like the field. There's like there's a poppy fields, but there's like flowers and going through the canyon and stuff. And he's sitting there with the reins in his lap a certain way, like you were talking about earlier.
Right. Yeah, well, I wanted, so that is if you look at just the composition of the panel, like it forms, if you squint, you can kind of see that the way the carriage back there and the cart and the buffalo, it forms like a kind of an arrow pointing back to the sword sitting next to him. And so I don't want to make a big deal out of it, but I wanted to make sure that while you're reading it, you saw it, and I show it before, I show it in other places too. So I want to make sure that, because that's going to become important later. And so I want, as we're moving basically away from them talking, going down the Sunflower Pass, past the buffalo, but like I want you to see that moment, understand what's happening, and then have the lingering idea of the sword sitting in front. And that's all the information you're really supposed to get from that, right? And so then, like, you see the sword again, he's moving, he's talking, and you get like, so they're moving forward. As we move the camera in, I want you to know that there's people in the cart. So that's where my heavy blacks are, and my intersecting bar lines pull your eye in. And also, once again, the angle of the sword kind of points into, and everything points into that area. So I want your eye to go to, and then you're in, right? And so, and and then these are the characters, and so you see them in a distance, kind of like you're it's a long shot pulling into a close shot.
Yeah.
And then the information I want you to get is that Rondo's a bit beat up. They're both in manacles and they're in bars, and the world is green and pretty outside around them, and that's not a world they can get to. So I want all that stuff to be immediate, if not subconscious, but something that I don't want you to if you ever linger on a panel and admire the artwork, I feel like I've almost failed in what I want to do. I want you to see it, experience it, understand it, get the information, get the story, and then move on. Right? I want you to slide along the drawings and the storytelling, and so that when the end comes, I want it to be a surprise. So
And see, I love this part where we're seeing a long panel, horizontal, and I love how it's kind of going up. It's got this pyramid shape, but you see this procession, and our prisoners are at the back of it, right? And so, like, our prisoners in that world and what they're doing is the least of this. And we start out with like a beautiful horse leading a giant elephant, an elephant that's bigger than any elephant I've ever seen.
right.
And and it's like, just you could see the progression of this procession going back to the losers in the back. The losers and the prisoners in the back. The kingly people, the big people, are on elephants and stuff leading the procession.
Right.
It's very clear. And then like that little bit of ancient architecture left, like somebody built real architecture in the middle of this, rocks and shit. Why the fuck did they do that? Fantasy stuff. Don't worry about it right now.
Yeah, it's magic.
Yeah.
Right.
I just want to add, this is definitely a panel worth lingering on, though.
It is.
Again, like the detail work just in the sunflowers, both communicating the perspective and like the density of that field is pretty amazing. And then also just beautiful rocky backdrop there with the rolling hills kind of leading up into the cliffs. I don't know. This is one that I would linger on.
Oh, thanks, Bill.
Yeah. This is the one I would linger on.
Oh, I think Brennan did such a great job. He the way he lit the water was a surprise to me. It's so luminescent. I'm like, oh, it brings the eye in, and it moves, right? There's a vibration to it that I really like. Yeah, he did a great job.
So can I ask, at what point, you and James Robinson talk about you're finally collaborating. He's got this idea, you guys build it together. At what point do you decide, rather than pitch this to Image or Dark Horse, we're going to turn this into a Kickstarter, and why do you make that decision?
Well, okay, so it's a good question, and a bit of an embarrassment for me, is that we were originally going to do it at Image. We sold it to Image first. We sold it to Image when it was called Cell Sword and Son. Okay. And they were really great, and they were excited about it. And then I got into it, and then I just took too long. I just took too long doing stuff, and there was no way that I was able to just do it, because you do it and then you hand it over to them. And there was just no way that I was going to be able to make it work. I was too slow. I was doing other stuff. I kept getting distracted. And so James finally came up with the idea, is like, listen, this is taking you forever. You're not going to get it done in a timely fashion at all while you're doing other work. So we have to figure out a way that you can just do this. And Kickstarter was the answer. So we decided to, we talked to Image. We're like, we can't do it. And so the Kickstarter will allow us to make enough money to put out the first issue, and hopefully for me to finish the second issue, and then just keep doing it that way. And so far, so good. But yeah, I mean, that's, it would have been at Image and it would have been glorious, but I just couldn't get it done.
Appreciate your honesty in that. Yeah. I mean, that's a super valid explanation. I also think, though, that speaks to another part of this whole, doing independent comics approach, is you're changing the distribution model a little bit.
Yeah.
Because Image, as much as Marvel or DC or anybody else, Image is still slave to, your Previews magazine or whoever they're using to distribute now. And, you got to have your solicitations out at a certain time. And if the books aren't on the shelf in the comic book shop, the Wednesday Warriors aren't going to be there to pick it up.
Right.
And so that's where it kind of intersects with this idea that you have more of a niche audience. Did you talk to anybody to kind of shape your thinking about how to package it for Kickstarter and who that audience might be versus like regular comic readers?
I did. So I'm very lucky that I know a lot of people who have had lots of successful Kickstarters.
Mm-hmm.
Jimmy Palmiotti, Dan Barrett, my friend Ryan Kincaid, my friend Curtis and Patrick. I've done podcasts with them. Like, they're amazing, successful Kickstarter publishers, I guess basically would be the word. And so I reached out to them, and they gave me all kinds of really fantastic advice about how to get started, how to fill out how to do behind the scenes stuff. But once again, it goes back, like, there's a community there who are willing to invite you in and give you all the secrets. It's amazing to me. They're like, oh, I made this mistake, don't make that mistake. Like, it's so supportive. And like, they really want, it's weird. Like, they really want the competition to succeed.
That is, yeah. I mean,
yeah,
that's very inspiring.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, the rising tide lifts all ships, that whole thing.
Yeah.
Yep. I want to bring up something maybe that is taboo, but I just want to talk about it a little bit, because I think it's one of those things that when we don't talk about this stuff, I think it gets lost out in the world. And I know everybody hates to say these words, but money.
Yeah.
So the thing is, I once looked up how much the average comic book artist made. And I want you to know that is the same amount of money that I make delivering weed.
Yeah.
It's about $38,000 a year to be a comic book artist, which is, I want to say, fucking insane.
Right.
And let's talk about, like, when you're an author, like a fantasy author, a good fantasy author puts out a book about every 2 years. Honestly, usually about every 2 years, a good one. There's
the
some
Patrick
guys
Rothfuss book is taking 10.
Yes, exactly. We're talking guys who they can take years and years to put out this stuff. They're doing the work that we've just talked about. They're figuring out how long it takes to someone to get across the city.
Exactly.
They're figuring out the stuff that tells the truth in the story, that really brings out the things that you care about when you read this stuff. And so, for instance, this thing that you guys were trying to do was trying to raise about $12,000,
right?
Which sounds like a lot of money to some people's brain, but when you look at how long it takes to do a great job on the art that you put together, the story that you're trying to tell, it's not even that much money. And I just want to point that out, and I want to point that out because I want people who are listening to understand how important it is to support independent creators in these scenarios, because
and also not to
working
back
their
off.
asses off. Yeah,
right.
Exactly.
And also not to back off once it's fully funded, because fully funded means I have the baseline amount to make it by the skin of my fucking teeth. The stretch goals are what enable him to have a fucking latte, for Christ's sake, while he's drawing the next thing. You know what I'm saying? And
because
I know
the goal is for you to not have to draw your storyboards for some random place that it calls you up because you're Jeff Johnson and you did storyboards for Ultimate Spider-Man and a bazillion other things. You know, the goal is to be able to make your own comic in that scenario for the year or two or however long you're doing it. And then if you feel like going back to storyboarding, great. But like, that's the goal. And if people don't support this sort of thing, you miss that goal. And I know it's a hard thing to talk about because we're all worried about money all the time.
Right.
And it feels like as a comedian, I constantly have to deal with this thing where people think they can just get me for free. And I'm like, nah, dude, this is 25 years of doing this shit. I'm great at stand-up. If you want me to come do your show and it isn't two miles from my house, you have to fucking pay me.
Yeah.
And it's like, I just want people to understand how long it takes and how much work goes into what we're working on, and the independent comics, the independent artists in general of all types that we do out here. So that's why I want to bring that up, even though it makes me feel weird because, you know.
Oh no, I'm happy to bring it up. One of the things I think is, well, there's a couple. My wife is a novelist and she experiences the same thing. Is like, if you are a professional artist and you have some notoriety, I think the assumption is that you're rich, that you made bank. And the truth is, when I broke into comics in the early in the early 90s, my page rate was $60. $60. That's how much I got paid for it. And that was and so that was my so if I did a page every day, which I could not do, which was a struggle. It took me all week to do my 5 pages, and even then, I still needed a couple fill-ins for Wonder Man back in the day, and that's when I was young and desperate and hungry. Now I'm just desperate. So, so $60, and that was what I got. And so that's, that is less than $10 an hour. All right. And back in the 90s, it way less, because it took me way more than 6 hours to do a page. So, in comics, my page rate at Marvel, even though I haven't done stuff for Marvel since I did those covers, those Carnage covers, my page rate is still the same page rate I had back in the 90s. It's still $200. And that's if I can do a page a day, which I can't do, right? That's $20 an hour. If I can do it in 10, like, that's just, I'm not making, like, you don't do, the thing about it is, like, you don't do this job to make a lot of money, right? You do this job because it's like a cancer in your head that you have to get out, right? And so there's a driving need, and when it comes to this Kickstarter, our original goal of and James and I went back and forth trying to figure out what the right number is, because the 1250 covers, or 12,500 covers the printing cost, the shipping cost, the paying our letterer, and getting the book put together, the final stages of it being put together. And we paid our variant cover guys, and Kickstarter takes some. And like, so in the end, James and I will only get paid if the book does way better than our goal. So, and luckily the second one is pretty much finished, except for the bells and whistles at the end with putting it all together. So we'll be able to put the second one out. And so we don't need a lot, but we need enough to keep doing it, because otherwise we run into my image problem, which is I have to take other work. I do commissions and I do all this stuff. It just takes too long to do a book. And what's funny is, like, we don't need much. We just need it consistently, right? And so I think that's the trouble with being a professional artist or a comedian or writer or filmmaker, is like, the dream is doing the stuff. Having the big, everyone thinks like, oh, you want a big house. I'm like, that stuff's not important. I mean, it's great. I mean, I love a latte, but like, I really just want to make enough to do the next book, to get this stuff into the hands of people. So yeah, Ron, it's tricky, man. It's because you want to price the book to where it's not going to cost you any money, which is tough, because even a Kickstarter book is still $15, which is more than a comic. Like, it's expensive. Supporting the people that you love can be expensive.
Yeah. And let me speak to that really quickly. I think having a girlfriend, I am irradiated by fucking Food Network content.
Right.
So I got that in my bloodstream, and I'm really looking at how many times, like, Michelin star restaurants and stuff like that, they have an entirely different clientele than McDonald's. I think comic book fans, by the looks of them, eat a lot of fucking McDonald's. You know what I mean? There's a lot of McDonald's going on in regards to.
How dare you say that about me?
But you know what I'm saying? There's a lot of McDonald's mentality in regards to, I could go here, the burger's going to be consistent, 2 pieces of cheese on top, 2 on the bottom, smeared together, 5 hours ago, and it's in my hand, and it tastes just like the last one I ate, so on and so forth. I'm part of that culture too still. But the point is, if I want a steak, I'm not going to go get McDonald's McSteakum or something. And I think a lot of people want Batman to be, or any big 2 comic to be, this steak with shallots on it and butter sauce and shit. And it's fucking very rarely that. But if you get your mind right and know the places to go, i.e. Kickstarter, i.e. certain image books, i.e. some of these places, you can get what you really want. You can get that seared ahi, whatever. You can get that, you can get that wasabi mayo on your thing. You can get all these different stuff that you can't get at McDonald's. And I just wish, my ardent wish is for comic culture to kind of just grow up a little bit in regards to our support of the creator and our support of original ideas, because it's the original ideas that make the art form flourish. When DC and Marvel start stealing from you guys and making those books smarter, it'll benefit us all. You know what I'm saying? If these
Right.
books are viable, then it benefits us all in the long run. Does that make sense?
It does, totally. Well, I think that it's tough. Like, one of the things that you want to do, I mean, I had great experiences at Marvel and DC back in the day, and I also had less than great experiences there. And I do think that when you're dealing with a company, you're dealing with a nameless and faceless entity. And one of the things that I love about comics is Walt Simonson said, I like to see the hand behind the drawing. And I just thought that was a really great way to phrase that. It's like, because I want I want to get a John Byrne book, or I want to get a Neil Gaiman book, or like, I'm responding to that person's soul on the page. And I think that's the thing. That's why if you like a musician, you don't go to see the cover band. You go to see the musician if you can't, unless you can't get that guy. So I think if comic book creators and creators in general, one of the things I can't stand is the idea of content, you're making content. When that phrase first started coming out a decade or so ago, I thought, like, that is the scummiest way for a marketing guy, for a lawyer to talk about art. And I think that we need more personal connection. We need more art. We need in our commercial art.
Content was one of the ways. I mean, I remember when I wouldn't even say the word. I used to call it the C word.
Right.
And content was one of the ways that the fucking, and I don't want to go off on a rant here, but it's one of the ways these stupid ass AI fucks worm their way into thinking that they were actual artists. Because once you take the art out of the word and you replace it with content, well, fuck it, man. However we get it, baby. I'll put some words to a computer, or I slave for 12 hours. Either way, it exists, right? So fuck it. It's all the same. No, it is not. No, it is not. No, it is not. So I thank you for making that point, that it's about us supporting these artists and their individual visions and stuff. And that's what the whole art form is supposed to be about.
Right.
But it got very quickly commercialized because they realized, hey man, well, if one guy can do a comic strip, then 16 guys could do a comic book. And all this math starts coming in with the assembly line. But you guys aren't an assembly line. You're 2 guys, 3 guys, however many, sitting down thinking about what you're going to execute and finding a new model to how to do it. And that's what's so admirable about this. I wanted to ask you really quickly about your average life as an artist. We talked about the money part. And we talked about how long it takes you to do comics. And we also talked about you doing storyboards to supplement your income. So what other things, you said commissions and stuff. I would love to hear about your commissions process, because I would love for people who listen to this podcast to leave a 5-star review, because this shit has been great content, you fucks. And you can leave a 5-star review and talk to us. I'm going to read one at the end of this. But the bottom line is, I want people to commission you. So please tell them how they can do so. And then tell me a little bit about your commission process and the types of ones that you get.
So commissions are it's an interesting side business that didn't really exist before. I mean, I've been doing con sketches for a long time, right? So you do, you go to a show and you see your artist, and then you would pay them a little bit and maybe get a sketch in a sketchbook or whatever. And so simple con sketches that were a piece of memory, a token, have become an entire cottage industry where some of the guys doing them are producing masterworks, gorgeous pieces of work, like the Chris Samney stuff. I don't know if you're familiar with his work, right? His commissions they're expensive, but they are unbelievable. And you get these cool images from him of your favorite characters that actually aren't happening in the book. Right. So it's the Batman that you would want to see. It's that thing you're talking about, Ed, earlier. Like, it's the character that you are excited about, right? Because you can ask for it specifically. So that has now become kind of a business where I've done more drawings of Wonder Man than I ever did when I was working on the book of just him. Right. So, and I love drawing that character, but apparently people like that character also when I draw them. And so I will get a lot of calls on Facebook or Twitter or Instagram where people are looking to have an original Jeff Johnson Wonder Man drawing. And so in the way that we used to do the Zagistic cons, thanks to social media, you can, if I'm at a show, you can get one. But if I'm not there, then you are out of luck. Now you can just call me. Now you can just email me or Facebook me, and then it's the same thing as getting a commission at a show. So it's really become, I have to say, it was a lifesaver during COVID, because a lot of the time it was pencils down, and then I made it myself available on a couple of different commission sites and online, and then I got a long list, and that's what I worked on for a couple of years. So it's and I can show you some. I think I have a couple around. Hang on a second, let me grab one.
Yeah.
Sick.
I think that's
So I do a lot of commissions. This is one I did of Black Kiss. And this is
nice.
and so
Awesome.
a lot of times, so I'll do the act commission, and these are a lot of ones that I've just done for fun on my own. So I take to shows, but also, so there's like, that's basically like Captain America, Guardian.
beautiful.
So yeah,
That Guardian is sick. I love the shadow. That Canada design is sick.
it's such a great design. And then
It
here's
is.
one of my all-time favorites. So sometimes I'll just draw stuff for fun, right? And there's a Wonder Man.
Nice.
Yeah, so these are just original single characters, and people love them. And so,
Well, you uphold the honored tradition of Kirby Crackle.
I love. I mean,
very
honestly,
well.
it's almost meditative, right? I love drawing them. Back in the day, do you know how they used to be done, Ed?
No.
Okay, so back in the day, the reason they're dots like that is you would take the ink bottle and you had that little plastic stopper,
Drip it.
and you would just drip it and dot it, and so the thing about it is, it was fast. It's a fast special effect, and it fills up the page with black, and it looks cool. It's brilliant. It's a brilliant mechanical technique. But I don't use that kind of ink, so I do them all by hand.
Sure.
Of course you do.
Yeah.
I mean, you could do variations with a Sharpie too, where it's more of like an
yeah.
oblong scribble, that sort of thing.
Oh, I definitely play with it. It's definitely fun, but just it's part of that visual lexicon. Like, it's that this is what power looks like.
Yeah.
And so I think that it's kind of fun to play with, and it's super meditative. I'll just draw. I get lost in the zone. It's good.
Yeah. Any way you do Kirby Crackle in the modern age is probably takes longer, because I downloaded some Kirby Crackle brushes. I ain't too proud to lie. I mean, I'm not gonna lie. I ain't too proud to beg, and I ain't too honorable to not lie about it. But it's crazy how, like, even when I'm doing Kirby Crackle with brushes, that preset brushes in Procreate, I still go, is this the right Kirby Crackle pattern? And then I'll mess with it some more, and then I'll mix it up. The opacity is like, okay, these energy dots are closer or farther.
Right.
Your mind starts doing all this shit when you're just doing the simple dots on a page. Your mind starts going all these places.
There's nothing simple about art, man. There's nothing.
Look, I never thought I would say this in my whole life, but you fucking nerds. Jesus.
Yeah, right. Oh yeah, you want to talk about special Kirby Crackle special effects? I have theories. There's reason.
Listen, I'm going to just jump in and say I think the best Kirby Crackle is when you have a black background and you're essentially using the crackle as the negative space.
Yep.
So the colorist then works with like the energy around the dots.
Mm-hmm. Yep, absolutely. And also, I'm not good at it. I've never mastered the technique, but then white paint splatter on top of the Kirby Crackle gives it some juice. Yeah.
Wow. I do an amateurish version of that, because it gets into your mind. You're like, oh fuck, this is different energies, baby.
Yeah.
And like, if I can layer my Todd McFarlane on top of my Kirby, I'm just gonna have immense energy.
Oh yeah, it's gonna leap right off the page.
That's what I'm saying.
Exactly.
Well, can you tell people how to get a couple of the sites that you're on for commissions, and how to contact you specifically for?
So I'm on Facebook, and I'm on Blue Sky, and I'm on Instagram, and I'm on Twitter X. So I'm just Johnsonverse, Jeff Johnson. I'm pretty easy to find.
Nice.
Mm-hmm.
And don't be afraid to drop a DM. Slide into Jeff DMs is what he's saying.
Please slide into my DM. It's on a side note. It's surprising how much porn is on. It gets.
Oh yeah.
I spend a lot of my day being like, "That's not a real person. That's not a real person."
Yeah,
real person.
It's crazy,
dude. Instagram really makes both Twitter and Instagram to give you this false hope, right? Like you'd be like 15 message requests, right? I'm popping off. I must have did great at the Comedy Store the other day. Let me check it out. Hello, baby. Want to
Yeah,
see
yeah.
my? Oh, okay. Well, I'll follow this one.
And the other half of them are like, we've looked at your page and we think you could sell this jewelry for us.
Right.
And it's
Oh
like,
my
No, you
God.
haven't.
Dude,
Yeah.
No, you haven't.
when I was fucking basically 380 pounds, these fools hit me up talk about active wear. I'm like, boy, you're barking up the wrong
Right.
tree, motherfucker.
Right.
This is
Yeah,
anti-advertising.
It made me write the joke that apparently I figured out what my face looks like. It looks like I'll join your OnlyFans, apparently.
Hey, they're profiling, brother.
Right.
But yeah, and then Twitter will give you 57 notifications, and it's just like whatever's going on in the world that has nothing to do with you and just a bunch of assholes opinions about it, and those are your notifications. Those should be my notifications. But yeah, but I want yours to blow up from people commissioning you, so
Okay,
that's
thanks,
why
man.
I had this
Yeah.
special section.
Yeah, so I
Awesome.
also want to just point you out to go to the Drink and Draw YouTube page and look up the Rogues Kingdoms launch party, because that has all of the possible links you could possibly use. But we will also copy those links and put them in the description down below in the YouTube video that comes out on this, and the podcast links as well. So
Oh, thanks, guys.
yeah, so it's definitely support Jeff's stuff, because man, it's super fun. And I'm so excited to get this book that I can't tell you. It's going to go right back there next to one of the dragons.
Awesome. Yeah. No, the dragon. I can't wait for the dragons. Like,
Oh, I'm so pumped.
well, one of the things that's so talking about doing your own thing and how institutionalized you can get sometimes is like, so early on in the first issue, there's a character who is a beaver. He's the major domo for the king. And like we see him like on page 8 or 9. And originally that was just an old dude, you know? And then I had the idea of making him an animal. I'm like, oh, I think he'd be a beaver. It sounds like, maybe I'll try that. And I designed him, and I gave basically this French, court outfit with like a cool beaver head and a staff. And I thought, like, yes, that's cool. I like that. But I had this thought of like, I started doing like, oh no, but like he's supposed to be a dude. Can I just make him can't just make him an animal? And I thought, like, yeah, you can. It's your book.
Yeah.
Right? But I had the thought, like, no, I can't do that. I don't know where that came from, but like, oh no, I can't make him an animal. He's supposed to be a guy. I'm like, it's my book. So I called James and I said, hey, can I make him into a thing? And James loved the idea. And now we have every animal. We have tiger guys. We have all this stuff. We have stick. So like, it changed the entire dynamic of the story. Just me breaking some ridiculous glass ceiling, right? Of imagination. Yeah.
Yeah, and then it adds in that thing where if there's tiger people, why can't everybody use magic? That which is part of the story. So like, yeah, cool.
No, it fits.
I love it.
Yeah, it was just one of those things that my resistance to it I always found really interesting. Like, where did that come from? Like, is that outside forces? Is that working within the system for so long that you feel you're constrained, or is it just the natural resistance of creativity? I've wrestled with that concept for a while. Like, what is it that keeps us from doing stuff that we should be doing?
Well, I mean, the whole story of Rogue's Kingdom is about, defeating dogma. And dog guys too.
And dog guys.
Dogmas. They're making dog babies. But defeating dogma and finding a new way to do stuff. And of course, that's the theme of this whole thing with your Kickstarter, finding a new way to fund comics. So again, Rogue's Kingdom, please go fund that Kickstarter, and we will have all the links, as Ron said, below.
Yeah. Also, leave us a 5-star review. We mentioned it earlier, but let's mention it again. Leave us a 5-star review. It really does help. And Ed, I hear you have a 5-star review for us.
Oh, here it goes. It is from Eternal_Sight. Eternal Sight. That's a fan of ours right there.
His third eye is open right there.
Yes.
That's what we're talking about.
Fuck yeah. And he uses one of my longtime phrases. It starts, long story boring. That's the title of it. So I love the lexicon getting into the fans' heads. Said, you will never be bored listening to these stories. Longtime listener, first time commenter. I love your content. I'm still Charlie Brown moping about the nerd goat being inaccessible, but these talks are always so insightful. Oh, and I got to tell you, Eternal Sight, we got to start putting up a lot more nerd goat content on the rebooted YouTube channel, as well as Nerd Goat Classics on the Greatest Pod YouTube channel. So all of that content is now owned by us again. So we will be putting that out with impunity, baby. So you'll be able to get those. And we're also toying with the idea of doing new Nerd Goat episodes. We'll have you on again, Jeff, to talk about your favorite fictional character that we haven't talked about before. And that would be great from you. But anyway, so yes, don't have to bemoan Nerd Goat being gone, because like a force ghost, it's right here, baby, giving instruction. All right, so yeah, Nerd Goat, blah, 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 and Disciple. Okay, here we go. I prefer when all three of you are together, ranting and laughing. That's when you got to stew, baby. Also,
which means we need Billy Business for that one.
Yeah.
And also, if I could get a shout out from Nightwang, that would be epic. Cheers.
Oh man, Nightwang. You know what? Hey, look. Okay, all right. What was your name? Eternal Sunshine or some shit? All right. It's pretty cool to meet you, man. Look, I'm gonna be fucking up Batman later because he thinks he's tougher than me, but he ain't, because I'm Nightwang. So all right. Talk to you later.
Hey, there you go. So there's a shout out from Nightwing. He was swinging by and he gave you that. So you're lucky, Eternal Sight.
Oh shit, it was Eternal Sight. I'm sorry. I don't know. But all right, bye.
He flipped out the window. All right. So that being the case, thank you guys for joining our Patreon, patreon.com/the greatest pod. Jeff Johnson is a member of our Patreon. So if it's good enough for a fucking genius, it's good enough for you guys.
Yeah.
And
take that compliment, Jeff.
Oh, okay, I'll sit with it.
So thank you for listening to another fiercely independent,
roguish,
kingdomy
episode of The Greatest Pod.